The sleaze scandal continues on and definitely shows at the moment no signs of slowing down. And obviously, the first casualty of this has been Owen Paterson. But we saw just a couple of weeks, literally just last week, Jacob Rees-Mogg got an absolute, well, dog pile on him to resign over his revelations of his like second jobs and the money that he had taken from his own second jobs and the loan that he had taken from his own personal company through the banks that he had done banks with, which everyone said, let's face it, unless he was a Conservative MP, he would have never have gotten that type of loan to begin with. So this shows no sign of slowing down. We know there are other current open investigations. There are currently, I think it's something like 40 Conservative MPs who are currently being investigated, as well as Boris Johnson in this. So this is just going to cascade and just keep on going. And we've already seen that in their own party, the new crop of Conservative Red Wall MPs are really annoyed at this because they know that they were voted on promises of change and that this was, quote, this type of sleaze was meant to not be in this type of new Tory party that their voters wanted to endorse. So they are getting lots of pressure from their constituencies to say, we want to make sure this change doesn't happen. And by the way, if you take part in this, you can kiss our votes goodbye. So the Conservative Party is very, very much swept up in this, but it is a very, very type of what is classically called a very conservative scandal. And it is a very particular type of Tory MP who has been taken up in this. It is eventually the most privileged of Tories you can think of. So let's dive more into this scandal and find a bit more about it. But like I say, even though there are three, quote, Labour MPs that got caught up in this, you've got David Lammy, who happens to have a radio show on LBC. That's where he gets his from. And then the other two work for doctors for the NHS who do some part-time practicing. It doesn't really make sense when all the other Conservatives are getting all these massive lobbying bills in. But hey, that's where this scandal is indeed heading, and it's going to be very interesting to see where this goes. But this does, as I've said before, open the doors for a massive Labour opportunity to score massive goals against the Conservatives, especially with pushing through a proper anti-corruption bill and like anti-sleaze bill that they could push through. So let's dive into this article then and find out more about the sleaze that is going on in Westminster. So as always, before we do jump in, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do support me that way. So let's jump into this then, shall we? So this comes from The Guardian with the title of "This is not a cross-party matter. Second jobs are a very conservative scandal." Over the past few weeks, the news has been dominated by headlines about MPs who abuse the parliamentary rules that allow them to have second jobs. This is a misleading generalised account of a specific and exceptional problem. The scandal is the direct result of Conservative ideology, one that has a fundamental conception of opinion of public service and a traditional leveraging of political contracts to feather the nests. Over the past 18 months, 148 MPs spent some time on a second job, according to the Register for Members' Interests. Of this number, 114 of those were Conservatives, whose activities make up for at least 87% of the income from those second jobs. Most of those incomes, of course, come from role in the private sectors: accountancy, investment banking, energy, pharmaceuticals, and the independent legal work. This is the time dedicated to those roles and the pay nettled from them. That could be argued that being a Tory MP in itself is a second job, or for some insurances, a third or fourth. This is not just an unfortunately timed snapshot that happens to have caught out the party when there's 6 times more MPs in second jobs than the opposition. Nor is it a party temporarily out under control of a very chaotic Prime Minister Boris Johnson, a man whose popularity and familiarity among the British public is a result of his very own various second jobs in the media, as opposed to the very serious political performance in office. To his credit, the Labour Party took the efforts to try and tackle this issue back in 2019. An entire pledge to ban second job was made by the party's manifesto, and its then leader, Jeremy Corbyn, expressly blocked any shadow cabinet members from second jobs, with limited exceptions to maintain professional registrations such as nursing. It is baffling that something identified as and stigmatized as for what was a technical solution has already been proposed should ever become a question in Parliament about the risks of a part-time Parliament. This seems like a pretty straightforward question about the values more than it is about the parliamentary roles or how it can motivate MPs not to take second jobs. It is unsurprising in a party that lauds aspiration that its MPs would be concerned about the change in lifestyle. Presumably, that one includes private school fees in their income if their income were to fall. Values are also being drawn from our backgrounds. The complaints from some about how difficult life is on a mere £181,000 a year plus benefits sound out of touch to you and me. But it is very much in touch with their peers and family networks. 41% of Conservative MPs went to independent schools, as opposed to just 14% of Labour MPs and 7% of the population as a whole. The newer intake of MPs, younger and more from the working class areas, are underrepresented in the second job markets, which is dominated by the older men who were the highest earners of all former cabinet ministers. For many, Conservative MPs' extra parliamentary activities are just simply factored in when choosing to go into politics, as these cushion the income they lose by not working in the private sector. Second jobs are also an insurance policy. By keeping one foot in the door, MPs are able to build or even maintain connections in the hope that they will be embraced when they quit when their tour in politics is done. When asked about his £150,000 a year second job with JP Morgan, Sajid Javid said, "It's good to have experience that is not all about politics." The follow-up question to that statement is, of course, good for who? Not making these connections between the type of people who become Conservative MPs and their political beliefs and their desire for and need for private incomes situates a problem in the general political system of naughty MPs, one of which MPs will either individually stick to in their hands in the honeypot or just drop out of politics altogether. And so we look for the quote realistic solutions to these quote complicated situations, including suggestions that we pay MPs more so they aren't forced to look elsewhere for income to meet their lifestyle needs. And we end up solving for a sin rather than condemning it. We resign ourselves to the flawed nature of a political class that is, in fact, a conservative class. The second jobs blight is not the natural outcome of is the natural outcome of the conservative philosophy towards political office, a place from which to wield power for the benefit of yourself and your connections rather than to serve. The solution, however, is simple. Restate what being an MP is all about: serving your constituents, and ban anything that gets in the way of this. And of course, that's not going to happen. That is never going to happen. We saw Boris Johnson come up and say, "I've got an idea that's going to solve all this, but we're only going to do it in January." Again, trying to kick this can down the road in hopes to try and take some pressure off all this scandal, essentially. But whatever Boris comes up will not be as good as what the Labour Party put forward, and they will be able to actually crucify Johnson on this when he brings these plans forward. And like I say, anything else that's left will just be proposed as a complete watered down nonsense. And even if this passes, or let's say it doesn't pass, this is an absolute godsend to Labour, because they can now campaign heavily, heavily on being a party for change. And as we've said before, not only changing the rules for politics, like banning second jobs, lobbying and all that, having tighter rules on that will be good for our democracy, but then they could also make the change for, like, let's change the House of Lords. Because if you think that this sleaze scandal is bad, the biggest scandal of all sits right in the House of Lords and has a huge political influence on our daily politics, and you don't even get to elect or unelect these people. So there is a massive opportunity here for Labour to swing in and say, we want to change the House of Lords to an elected House of Regional Representatives. That is what they must go for, and get it through with proportional representation, because that'll be the key to really changing the dynamic of politics in this country. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me a coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do support me that way. And of course, we'll see you all next time.